Have you ever had one of those nights where everything seems to go wrong and you just want to crawl into bed and forget the world exists? My name is Dong Hyun, and what happened to me in that elevator still haunts me every time I hear those mechanical doors slide shut. I was 29, working a soul-crushing office job in one of Seoul's glass towers, and that particular Thursday had been the kind of day that makes you question every life choice you've ever made. The fluorescent lights in my office had been flickering all afternoon, casting stuttering shadows across my desk, while I stared at spreadsheets that seemed to multiply before my eyes. My supervisor had dumped 3 urgent projects on me right before lunch, each one demanding impossible deadlines. By the time I finally escaped that corporate prison, it was well past 11 at night, and the city streets were mostly empty except for the occasional taxi and a few stragglers stumbling out of convenience stores. The subway ride home felt endless. I slumped in my seat, watching my reflection in the dark window as the train rattled through underground tunnels. My shirt was wrinkled, my tie hung loose around my neck, and I could feel the exhaustion seeping into my bones like poison. When I finally reached my stop, I dragged myself up those concrete steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. My apartment building loomed above me, a 30-story concrete monolith that housed hundreds of people living their separate, isolated lives. The lobby was dimly lit, with that sterile smell of industrial cleaning supplies and old carpet that every apartment building in Seoul seemed to share. The security guard was nowhere to be seen, probably dozing in his booth like he did every night after 10. I shuffled toward the elevator bank, my footsteps echoing hollowly in the empty space. There were 3 elevators, but only the middle one had its call button lit. I pressed it and waited, tapping my foot impatiently as I watched the numbers slowly descend. 12, 11, 10, 9. Come on, I thought, just get me to the 15th floor so I can collapse on my couch and pretend this day never happened. When the elevator finally arrived with that familiar ding, the doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The interior was bathed in harsh white light that made everything look washed out and clinical. I stepped inside, my shoulders sagging with fatigue, and turned to face the button panel. 15. That's all I needed to press, just one simple button to end this miserable day. But standing there in that small metal box, surrounded by mirrors that reflected my tired face back at me from multiple angles, I felt a surge of irritation that had been building all day. The elevator was moving too slowly. The light was too bright. The music playing softly from hidden speakers was some generic instrumental version of a song I hated. I let out a long, heavy sigh and shook my head. My finger hovered over the button for the 15th floor, but somehow, in my distracted state, I found myself pressing other numbers instead. 4 first, because that's where Mrs. Kim lived. The elderly woman who always complained about noise in the hallways. Then 2, where that couple with the crying baby had moved in last month. 6 next, though I couldn't remember who lived there. Another 2, because why not? Then 10, almost at random, followed by 5. I didn't think about what I was doing. I was just pressing buttons, letting my frustration guide my movements as I imagined all the stops this elevator would make, all the extra time it would take to reach my floor. Maybe I wanted to punish myself for having such a terrible day, or maybe I was just too tired to think clearly. The elevator lurched slightly as it began to move, and I leaned against the back wall, closing my eyes. I could feel the familiar sensation of rising, that slight pressure in my ears as we climbed past the 4th floor. The doors opened with their mechanical whisper, but no one got on, just empty hallway stretching into darkness. Up to the 2nd floor next, though that didn't make sense since we'd already passed it. The doors opened again, revealing another vacant corridor. I frowned, feeling the first stirrings of unease. Elevators didn't usually go backward like that, did they? But I was too exhausted to really focus on it. The pattern continued. 6th floor, doors opening to silence. 2nd floor again, which definitely wasn't right. Then the 10th floor, where the doors stayed open longer than usual, as if the elevator was waiting for something or someone. The air in the small space felt heavier somehow, pressing against my chest with each breath. Finally, the 5th floor. I barely looked up when the doors slid open, expecting to see another empty hallway. Instead, there was someone standing there. A woman in a black dress, her long, dark hair hanging forward to partially obscure her face. She stepped into the elevator without a word, moving with an odd, deliberate grace that seemed almost mechanical. I nodded politely, the way you do when a stranger joins you in an elevator, but she didn't acknowledge me at all. She just stood in the corner opposite me, perfectly still, her hands folded in front of her. I couldn't see her face clearly through her hair, but something about her presence made the small space feel even more confined. The silence stretched between us as the elevator continued its journey. I found myself stealing glances at her reflection in the polished metal doors, but the image seemed slightly off somehow, like a photograph that had been taken with a shaky camera. She never moved, never shifted her weight, never made the small unconscious adjustments that people usually make when standing in close quarters with a stranger. I reached for the button panel, intending to press the 1st floor so I could get out and take the stairs instead. Something about this whole situation was making my skin crawl, though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what was wrong. But when I pressed the button for the lobby, nothing happened. The elevator continued climbing, past the 6th floor, past the 7th, past floors I knew didn't exist in my building. I pressed the 1st floor button again, harder this time, but the elevator ignored my command completely. The digital display above the doors showed numbers that made no sense. 7, 8, 9. My building only had 15 floors, but we were climbing past them into territory that shouldn't exist. The woman in the corner remained motionless, her breathing so quiet I couldn't even hear it over the mechanical hum of the elevator's motor. I stared at the floor numbers, willing them to make sense, when the elevator finally shuddered to a stop. 10. The highest floor in the sequence I'd accidentally pressed, though I still didn't understand the significance of what I'd done. The doors opened with that same mechanical whisper, but what lay beyond wasn't the 10th floor of my apartment building. It wasn't any floor of any building I'd ever seen. Instead, there was darkness, complete, overwhelming darkness that seemed to swallow the light from the elevator like a hungry mouth. But it wasn't empty darkness. In the distance, far across what appeared to be an endless void, the light was shaped like a cross hanging suspended in nothingness, casting no shadows and illuminating nothing around it. The air that drifted into the elevator carried a metallic taste, sharp and bitter against my tongue. It reminded me of the smell of old coins, or the way blood tastes when you bite your tongue too hard. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, to make sense of what was happening, but when I pressed the power button, nothing happened. The screen remained black, as if the device had been drained of all life. I pressed it again, holding it down longer, but it was completely dead. The reflection in the polished elevator doors caught my attention, and I felt my stomach drop. My image in the metal surface was moving just slightly out of sync with my actual movements. When I raised my hand, the reflection followed a split second later. When I turned my head, the reflected version lingered before matching the motion. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but wrong enough to make my skin crawl. That's when I heard it. A soft sound from the corner where the woman stood. I turned slowly, afraid of what I might see, and found her head tilted at an impossible angle, looking directly at me. Her hair had fallen away from her face, revealing features that seemed carved from pale stone. But it was her smile that made my blood freeze in my veins. Her mouth stretched across her face far wider than any human smile should, the corners extending nearly to her ears. Her lips were black as ink, and when they parted, I could see rows of teeth that seemed to go back forever into the darkness of her throat. The smile never wavered, never changed, just held that horrible, impossible width while her eyes remained completely empty. Panic crashed over me like a wave. I spun back to the button panel and began pressing every button I could reach, desperate to escape this nightmare. My fingers moved frantically, hitting numbers at random, but nothing seemed to work. The elevator remained frozen on this impossible 10th floor. Doors opened to the void, while that thing in the corner continued to smile its terrible smile. Then, by some desperate instinct, I found myself pressing the same sequence again. 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, 5. The elevator jolted violently, throwing me against the wall as the lights flickered and died. My vision blurred, the darkness rushed in, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the elevator floor, fluorescent lights humming normally overhead. The door stood open, revealing the familiar lobby of my building. The woman was gone. I scrambled to my feet, checking my phone with shaking hands. 3:07 in the morning. But I had entered this elevator just after midnight. Hours had simply vanished. I ran through those lobby doors without looking back, taking the stairs to my apartment 3 at a time. For weeks, I tried to convince myself it had been a stress-induced hallucination, nothing more than exhaustion playing tricks on my mind after that terrible day. But when I finally worked up the courage to use that elevator again, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Scratched into the metal panel beside the buttons, barely visible unless you knew where to look, were numbers carved in desperate, jagged strokes. 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, 5, and underneath them, in the same frantic handwriting, 4 words that still make me take the stairs every single night. Don't look at her.